Welcome to Algebra 1, Unit 7, Lesson 14, Practice Problems. We have three vocabulary terms. The first is completing the square. Completing the square in a quadratic expression means transforming it into the form a times the quantity of x plus p squared minus q, where a, p, and q are constant. Completing the square in a quadratic equation means transforming into the form a times the quantity of x plus p squared equals q. The next vocabulary term is perfect square. A perfect square is an expression that is something times itself. Usually we are interested in situations where the something is a rational number or an expression with rational coefficients. And the third vocabulary term is rational number. A rational number is a fraction or the opposite of a fraction. Remember that a fraction is a point on the number line that you get by dividing the unit interval into b equal parts and finding the point that is a of them from 0. We can always write a fraction in the form a over b, where a and b are whole numbers with b not equal to 0. But there are other ways to write them. For example, 0.7 is a fraction because it is the point on the number line you get by dividing the unit interval into 10 equal parts and finding the point that is 7 of those parts away from 0. We can also write this number as 7 over 10. The numbers 3, -3/4, and 6.7 are all rational numbers. The numbers pi and -√2 are not rational numbers because they cannot be written as fractions or their opposites. If you have any questions about the vocabulary terms, please ask for clarification before we move on so that you understand when you see them in the practice problems. In our first practice problem, they ask us to select all expressions that are perfect squares. So we're going to go through one by one and decide whether we get the expression given to us by multiplying something by itself. So as we look at A, in order for this to be a perfect square, ax squared and c would need to be squares, and they are. In this case, we would have 3x times 3x to get 9x squared, and we would have, because this is positive, we would have plus 4 and plus 4 to get 16. Now if we did these together, we would have 3x times 4, which is 12x, and we would have 4 times 3x, which is 12x, and 12x plus 12x would give us the 24x in the middle. So this is a perfect square. It is 3x plus 4 squared. So A is a correct choice. Now we need to look at B. Again, ax squared and c would need to be perfect squares. They're not. C is a perfect square. That would be 10 times 10. and 10x plus 10x would be 20x, but in order to get 2x squared, we would need it to be 2x times x. 2x squared is not a perfect square. Therefore, b is not a perfect square. Choice C. This is already in perfect square notation. We have 7 minus 3x squared. That is a perfect square, so it is a correct answer. Choice D. We have 5x in both, and we have 4 in both, but it's plus 4 in the first factor, and it's minus 4 in the second factor. So the factors are not the same. So D is not a perfect square. When we look at choice E, we have 1 and 2x in both. 1 is positive in both, and we have negative 2x in both. The factors are the same, therefore E is a perfect square. And finally, choice F, we would need 4x squared to be a perfect square, which it is. That would be 2x times 2x. And we would need positive 9/4 to be a square, which it is. That's 3 halves times 3 halves. And because our first sign is positive, this is plus 3 halves. Now if we multiplied this together, 2x times 3 halves would be 3x, and 3 halves times 2x would also be 3x, and 3x plus 3x would be the 6x in the middle, so this is a perfect square. If you have any questions about how to identify expressions that are perfect squares, please ask for clarification now so that you are better prepared as we move forward on to the other practice problems. Page 2, find the missing number that makes the expression a perfect square. Next, write the expression in factored form. Well, we're going to do these at the same time. Remember, to come up with the factored form, I need to know what the factor of 49x squared is for it to be a perfect square. Well, the square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of x squared is x. Then I need to look at the c term, and the square root of 16 is either positive 4 or negative 4. The first symbol being a minus sign tells us we want negative 4. So the factored form is 7x minus 4 squared. Now what we can do is we know that the middle portion is going to be 2 times 7x times negative 4. 2 times 7x is 14x, and 14x times negative 4 is negative 56x. So they've already given us the negative, they've already given us the x. The 56 is what's missing. Number 2. The square root of 36 is 6. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 4 is either 2 or negative 2. The first sign being a plus sign tells us we want plus 2. So the factored form is 6x plus 2 squared. To find the missing number, we're going to do 2 times 6x times 2. 2 times 6x is 12x, and 12x times 2 is 24x. So the missing number is 24. Number 3. The square root of 4x squared is 2x. The square root of 25 is either positive 5 or negative 5. The minus sign at the beginning tells us we want minus 5. So the factored form is 2x minus 5 squared. Now to find the missing number, we're going to multiply 2 times 2x times negative 5. 2 times 2x is 4x, and 4x times negative 5 is negative 20x. So the missing number is 20. Number 4. The square root of 9x squared is 3x. The square root of 9 is either positive 3 or negative 3, and the first symbol being a plus tells us it's positive 3. So the factored form is 3x plus 3 squared. Now we're going to multiply 2 times 3x times 3. 2 times 3x is 6x, and 6x times 3 is 18x. So the missing number is 18. And number 5, the square root of 121x squared is 11x. The square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. The first sign being plus tells us we want plus 3. So the factored form is 11x plus 3 squared. Now we multiply 2 times 11x times 3. 2 times 11x is 22x. 22x times 3 is 66x. So our missing number is 66. If you have any questions about how to find the B term when given the A and the C term, please ask for clarification so that you're better prepared as we move forward to the next practice problem. Middle of page 2. Find the missing number that makes the expression a perfect square. Next, write the expression in factored form. So for number 1, I know that the square root of 9x squared is 3x. To find the missing number, I know that I would multiply 2 times 3 times something to get 42. 2 times 3 is 6. So this is 6 times something equals 42. And if I divide both sides by 6, I find out that that something is 7. So my missing number would be 49 because 7 times 7 is 49. And this makes my factored form 3x plus 7 squared. Number 2. I know that the square root of 49x squared would be 7x. I know that I would be multiplying 2 times 7 times something to get negative 28. 2 times 7 is 14. And if I divide both sides by 14, then that something I'm missing is negative 2. So I'm going to put the negative 2 in my factored form. And I know that negative 2 squared is positive 4. So my missing number is positive 4. Number 3. I know that the square root of 25x squared is 5x. I know that I'm going to multiply 2 times 5 times something to get 110 in the middle for my b term. 2 times 5 is 10. And when I divide both sides by 10, I find out that that something is 11. So I'm going to put plus 11 in my factored form, and then 11 squared would be 121 for my missing number. Number 4. I know that the square root of 64x squared would be 8x. I know that I would multiply 2 times 8 times something to get my b term, which is negative 144. 2 times 8 is 16. And if I divide both sides by 16, I find out that that something is negative 144 divided by 16 equals negative 9. So I'm going to put 8x minus 9 squared for my factored form. And I know that negative 9 squared is 81. So my missing number is 81. And finally, number 5. I know that the square root of 4x squared is 2x. I know that I'm going to multiply 2 times 2 times something to get my b term, which is 24. 2 times 2 is 4. And if I divide both sides by 4, I find out that that something is 6. So my factored form is 2x plus 6 squared, and 6 squared is 36. So my missing number is 36. If you have any questions about how to find the missing c term when you are given the a and b terms, please ask for further clarification so that you are prepared as we move forward to the next practice problem. Our last practice problem for lesson 14. Number 1, find the value of c to make the expression a perfect square, then write an equivalent expression in factored form. This is exactly what we did in the previous practice problem. So I know that the square root of 4x squared is going to be 2x. And I know that I'm going to multiply 2 times 2 times something to get my b term, which is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And if I divide both sides by 4, I find out that that something is 1. So I have 2x plus 1 squared. And now I know that 1 squared is 1, so my missing number would be plus 1. On the next one, I know that the square root of 25x squared is 5x. I know that I'm going to multiply 2 times 5 times something to get my b term, which is negative 30. 2 times 5 is 10. And if we divide both sides by 10, that something is negative 3. So my factored form is going to be 5x minus 3 squared. Now, negative 3 squared is 9, so my c term is plus 9. Number 2. Solve each equation by completing the square. So, I know that I would have 2x as the square root of 4x squared. I know that I would need to multiply 2 times 2 times something to equal my b term, which is 4. So that means 4 times something equals 4, so that something is 1. So I know I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So I know that 1 squared is 1. So this is going to be 2x plus 1. And I know that 3 plus 1 is 4. So now I would take the square root of both sides. So I either have 2x plus 1 equals positive 2, we would subtract 1 from both sides and have 2x equals 1, and then divide both sides by 2 and get my first answer, x equals 1/2. Or we would say that 2x plus 1 equals -2. Subtract 1 from both sides and get 2x equals -3. Then when we divided both sides by 2, we would get our other answer, x equals -3/2. And lastly, I know that the square root of 25x squared is going to be 5x. I know that I need to move this 8 to the other side. Now, I would need to multiply 2 times 5 times something to get my b term, which is -30. 2 times 5 is 10. And if I divide by 10, I find out that something is -3. So this would be 5x minus 3 squared. -3 squared is 9, so I'm going to add 9 to both sides. So I now have my factored form 5x minus 3 squared equals 1, because -8 plus 9 is +1. So now when I take the square root of both sides, I either have 5x minus 3 equals 1, or 5x minus 3 equals -1. We would add 3 to both sides, and we would get 5x equals 4, or 5x equals 2. We would divide both sides by 5, and our answers are either x equals 4/5 or x equals 2/5. If you have any questions about any of the practice problems we've done in lesson 14, please ask for clarification before we move on to lesson 15 so that you're prepared.